Hei alle norskstudentene mine! Hi all my Norwegian students. Today we're going to be talking a bit about numbers. So we did this a little bit in lesson number 1, but I'd like to start by reviewing what we did there. So the Norwegian word for 0 is null. Null. Now the Norwegian word for 1 is a little bit special because it has a couple different forms. So as we discussed in previous lessons, each noun in Norwegian can take the article either en or et, depending on the word. Again, there's no way of knowing which article a noun will take other than just memorizing it. So with respect to the number 1, if I'm talking about an en word, for example, en ball, it just stays en. So that one is really simple. I would say, for example, the sentence ta en ball, men bare en. So take a ball, but only one. However, for et words, it's a little bit different. So for example, we have the word et eple, an apple. Now, an apple, of course, is et eple, but if I want to specify one apple, I have to use et with 2 t's. So take the sentence, for example, ta et eple, men bare et. So take an apple, but only one. So for all et words, when you want to specify one, you use 2 t's, but if you're talking about a or an of that item, it's just the regular et. However, if I'm counting, I would usually start with an. All right, so counting, we have en, to, tre, fire, fem, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and please make a mental note of how different the pronunciation of 16 is from the way it's written. It's written like sexten, like the number 6, sex. However, it's pronounced 16, 16. And then we have 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and so on. You just take the word for 20 and add the number 1. There's no hyphen or anything. They just make it into one word. That goes all the way up to 29. 30 is 30. We have 31, 32, and so on. 40 is 40. 50 is 50. 60 is 60. 70 is 70. 80 is 80. 90 is 90. And so, of course, for all the in-between numbers that I didn't mention, for example, you want to say the number 85, you just take the number 80, 80, and add 5 to it, fem, 85, right? Simple. The Norwegian word for 100 is 100, and if I'm talking about 100, I can specify 100, or just say 100. If you say 100, it means 100. Now, if I want to add more to that, I always have to use the word and, like we sometimes do in English. For example, if I wanted to say 197, I have to have that and there. I know in English we can sometimes just say 197 without using the and, but in Norwegian you always have to have the and there. So 197 in Norwegian would be 197. And you just add all those words together in one long word, no spaces or anything. So it looks really scary, but if you break it down, it's really not that bad. Now for 1,000, it's 1000. And again, the et here is optional. If I just say 1000, I'm talking about 1,000, or I can say 1000. But if I'm combining that with something else, usually I would put in the et. So 1147, 1,147. There you do add the ets. For million, it's en million, not et, and here the en is not optional. If I want to say a million, I have to say en million. Million by itself doesn't mean a million. And the same thing with billion and milliard. Again, you have to use the and if you want to specify 1 million. You can't just say milliard like you can with 100 and 1000. Also, something that's unique about million and milliard, million and billion, is that they become plural when you're talking about more than one of them. So I have en million, 1 million, but 2 millioner, with the er, making it plural at the end. 2 millioner and 2 milliarder. You have to add the er at the end to make it plural, which you don't do with 100 and 1000. So just to review, we have 100, 100, 1000, 1000, 1 million, a million, and milliard for a billion. Okay, now I'm going to give you some examples of some really long numbers in Norwegian. And when you see them written out, they look pretty scary because they don't have any spaces or dashes or anything. But if you break it down, it's pretty simple. So let's, for example, take the number 243,516. Now, in Norwegian, that would be 243,516. 243,516. I'll give you one more. Let's do 43,762,811. In Norwegian, that would be 43,762,811. All right? Looks really long and scary, but it's not that bad. You just break it down. 43,762,811. All right, so I hope that wasn't too confusing for you. Norwegian numbers are not that hard, except for what I'm going to do now. And I'm really sorry about this, guys, to make it confusing. But the thing is that there are a few different ways to say certain Norwegian numbers. Now, I would suggest that you learn the way that I've already taught you. It's the easiest way to do it. However, you should be familiar with these other ways of saying certain numbers so that you understand what somebody is saying if they say it to you. All right? So for the numbers from 0 through 19, except for the number 1, which we already talked about, there's only one way of saying that. However, once we get to 20, you can use 20, which is what I told you earlier. However, 20 can also be said 20, 20. And if you want to use 20, moving on to 21, 22, and so on, you can't do what we did before. You can't say 21. That doesn't make any sense in Norwegian. You have to say 21, 1 and 20. So it'd be 21, 22, 23. And this also works for 20. You can also say 21, 22, 23, and so on. And for 30, which I told you before was 30, there's also another way to say 30, which is 30. And again, you wouldn't say 31, 32, 33. That doesn't make sense in Norwegian. You have to say 31, 32, 33, and so on. For 40, it can be 40, as I said before, or 40. So you can say 41, 42, 44. The 20s, I guess, are the most difficult because there are 3 different ways of saying them. So for the number 23, I could say 23, I could say 23, or I could say 23. So there's 3 different ways of saying it. For the 30s, there's 2 different ways. 33 would be either 33 or 33. And for 43, you could either say 43 or 44. Now, for 50, 60, 70, and so on, there is not another word. We still use 50, 60, 70, but you could say 53 or 53. You could say 64, 64, or 64. You could say 72 or 72. You could say 98, right, 98, or 98. So the kind of 98, 49, that way of saying things is a bit more old-fashioned, so you'll mainly hear older generations saying that, but it's definitely prevalent. You will hear it if you're coming to Norway, certainly if you're going to live here, so you don't have to say it that way, but you should at least be familiar enough that you understand what people are saying when they do it that way. So I hope that made sense and wasn't too confusing. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. But before we part, my darlings, I shall of course be leaving you with this lesson's bonus word. Now today we're going to be talking about a word, a kind of inherently sexy word, which the Norwegians have managed to make the least sexy word ever. So that is the Norwegian word for nipple. In Norwegian, a nipple is called en brystvorte, which directly translates to a breast wart. So et bryst is a breast, or could also be chest, and en vorte is a wart. So there you have it, en brystvorte, a breast wart. Isn't that just charming? Thanks for watching!